Okay, so we'll continue with the, last session we were looking at the creation of the list. What you need to remember is usually to represent a list in Python, we are using square brackets and usually we comma separate them. And there are different methods for you to, manipulate. For example, adding, you can use two methods, append to add item to the end of the list, and insert you can use anywhere the way you want. Like for example, if you want to add something on as the first item or the second item, third item, and so on. Then we can also use len functions to get the length of the list. Sometimes, for example, we can, when we learn how to use data sets, we can see like, number of, let's say, features or number of records. We can use len function. Because sometimes we will learn other data structures also available for this, but sometimes we convert it to list and we work with the list as well. So you need to, like, if you're not familiar with the lists in Python, I think you better start looking at this, because we'll be using these methods later on, so you should understand. The del keyword is an important one. Usually when you want to delete individual items, you can say del and name of the list. Within that, you can put the index value. And I think I have mentioned about the forward and backward indexing as well. So when you say number list 0, it will remove the first item from the list. If you want to deallocate memory for the lists, right? So it will actually remove the list. Before we continue with the tuple, I want you to discuss something very important, how in the memory, how the lists are represented. So I think we were working on Jupyter notebooks, right? We were using Colabs. Can one of you confirm?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So let's open up a new session for today's one. Let me share my last, notebook with you. Right. Is it visible to you? Yes. Right. So before we start today, I want to ask, by the way, today is the third session, right?
Yes.
Right. I don't know why I end up with the module, so I was wondering. Yeah, we have done it. Yes, sorry. So let me start a new code video. Right. One more thing I want to ask. Right. Let me put in this way. I want you to give me an answer for this. So I will create a list called A with some values. Right. Let me say I'm going to create A equals 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I will say B equals A. And then I will say A dot append, let's say 5. If I print B, what would you expect? Those who knows the answer? Because you are helping others as well. Can one of you tell me like what happens here? Any volunteer, please? Or you can even guess.
Nothing changed, right?
Nothing changed, right? Now, what happens here? I have list A with 4 elements. and then I will say B equals A, and then I'm appending 5 to A, and I'm printing B. What would you expect in B? Is it 1, 2, 3, 4, or is it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5?
1, 2,
1, 2,
3,
3, 4,
4.
5.
Okay, so this is, I need to clarify. So let me clarify. Let me run and show you, and then I will explain. If you're familiar with other programming language, we need to clarify how Python works. So what has happened? Now, can you tell me what has happened?
So it add the 5 to the list.
Yes. Now, when you say A, we create a list. In the memory, we will have a block allocated for the 4 items, right? And then, in Python with the assignment, you are creating it. So the list item, so A is actually referencing the memory location of the items. Now, when you say B equals A, what will happen? Will it create a new list, or will it point in the same list?
Same.
Same list.
Yeah, according to this one, you can see in Python what happened. It won't create a new one. So it will refer the same thing. That's why when you say A, you are appending 5 to A, right? So that means you are creating, appending another value to A, which change B as well. So make sure that, so what that means, if you want to, create a B without changing the content, what should we do then?
The current knowledge, if you pass through a function, it will create another reference ID. But it's
Exactly.
another way to do.
Exactly. So remember that this is very important sometimes, because what you are getting is you are referencing the same thing. So if you need a copy, we have to use a special method for this, right? So that you have to remember, because sometimes you might think, okay, when you say B equals A, it will create another list. No, it will refer the same list. So if you need a copy, so this is what you should do. Make a note of this. This is, I think I have not included in the note. So if you say A equals 1, 2, 3, 4, and sorry, 2, 3, 4, right? And if you want to have a, not the A, but a copy of A, we have to say A dot copy. Make a note of this, right? Now, if you do the same, A dot append 5, and if you say print B, since B is creating a copy of A, so that will refer the separate copy of A. It will not refer the same thing. So make a note of this. Sometimes if you see this, that means if you are using the copy of A here, right?
So in the first example, can we call B as a pointer to A?
Yes, exactly. That's what we call pointer. So in Python, you can look at ID. There's a method called ID where you can look at the memory reference. Let me check it here. So if I say print ID A, and when I say print ID B, and if I run this, we will get 2 different memory references. Whereas,
So what will happen if you print A also, it gives some error. Like if you put print A and print B after amend,
yes,
so then it will give, it gives only A, but it doesn't give B.
yes, definitely, because like, now it's just a reference, right? So when you say memory reference, it means you are pointing the memory location for A in the first place. So when you say B equals A, you are actually referencing the same memory location in the first case. So when you change A, it will change whatever the content in the memory location, which affects the B as well. So if you use ID, let me check ID A. This is also not included in the note, but those who are interested and if you really want to know, then you can see what happens here. So in the first place, it'll give you the same ID gives you the memory reference. So the first case, it will be the same. So that's why when you change A, it will change, in B also you get the same change. But in the second one, you see that the two two lists A and B, you have two different memory references. Right. Okay. So having said that, I think we can move on the next one. So the next thing I'm going to talk about tuples in Python. Now to talk about tuples in Python, we are going to work on the representation, tuple representation. Okay, but before that, I think I missed one exercise. Right, let me share the slides. Can you quickly give me the code for this? So once you finish the exercise, I want to do these tasks and then please share me your code in the chat or in the WhatsApp group. So I will also start working together, but you can complete and share with me and then please raise your hands. Right. So this is the exercise. Right. How do you create a list? So let me say this is a shopping list. Right. You can use any name. And I told you you had to use square brackets. Remember this time we have some item names, which means we have to represent them as string values. Right. So to represent it, I can say, okay, apple, we can say mango, carrot, and banana. So that's the first task. Now let's print the length. So print in the length, you can simply say len, and then whatever the list name. But it always recommended to use print, because when you have multiple values, you might not get this outcome. So because of that, I will use the print statement. With f strings, I will say, okay, the length yes. But basically, I did this. I used the latest representation of f strings, or you can simply comma separate them. You don't have to use the same way. Another way is simply you can say print the length is, you can say comma length shopping list. Right. If you are new to Python, sometimes you might confuse, but that will be the same representation, because the previous one is actually good for formatted output. For example, you can make, okay, 2 decimal places. With colon, you can make it to 1 decimal place or 2 decimal place, and so right. Then printing items. If you want to print everything, you can simply say print shopping list. Yes, we'll print everything as a list as it is. Or if you can use a for loop, simply in for loop, we can say for I in, we can say shopping list. The reason is this is iterable, meaning like you have set of items. So in a for loop, it will iterate each item at a time. So if you say print I should print, item at a time, right? So you can see apple, mango, carrot, and banana. Those are the 2 ways that you can print the item. The next one is adding the rice to the list. Either you can use append or insert. If you use append, it will add to the end of the list. Insert, you have to specify where do you want to insert. So in my case, simply I will say, okay, so shopping list dot append, I can say rice. And if you print shopping list, now you will see that it's updated with rice now. If you want to sort the list, should be shopping list dot sort. So now we will get a sorted list. By the way, can somebody tell me like how do you sort in a descending order? So in this particular case, it goes from ascending order. How do you know that? How to sort? So the technique is you get the help. We want to get list sort. So if I type like this, yes, I'm getting the help on sorting. So you can say sort self, and this is the continuation. So we have reverse false. Now reverse meaning like if you need a descending order, then you have to say reverse to true, right? So this is not asked. So, but you can try, for example, here, we can say, okay, yeah, shopping list dot sort. If you say reverse true, right? And then if you print shopping list, yeah, so you will get descending order. That is, for you to understand how the sorting works. How did I know? I mean, like, I just look at the help. Now, the next one is, okay, print the first item. We know that it's, we can use print shopping list, and within bracket, you can specify the first item. That means we have to put 0, right? And ideally, we should get it as apple. Right. Removing the first item, I can simply say del shopping list 0. That is one way to do this. And if you say print shopping list, yes, it will remove it from there. And there will be a method, for example, let's take help list dot remove. Yeah. So if you want to remove, that is with the value, right? So, that means in this particular case, I can use it, for example, let's say the current list is, right? If I just say shopping list, okay, we have banana, carrot, mango, and rice. So I think we can say, okay, shopping list dot remove. You can provide a value, let's say mango. Right? And if you put the shopping list again, so hopefully mango is also removed, right? That is with the value. Remember, if you have multiple values, it will remove the first occurrence, right? In our case, we can say first item. So we use del here. And then we print the shopping list. Right. Those who have finished, can you raise your hand so that I can move to the next point? Okay. Thanks, everyone. Anyone needs more time? Okay, you can lower the hands. Thanks. Right, next one. When you have a nested lists, right? So in this particular case, that means one other thing that I actually forgot to mention, Python lists are not fixed, and you can have a different number of lists compared to some other programming languages, which I can explain it here. First of all, a nested list means you can have list within other list, which is very important, right? So now if you compare my previous shopping list, it contains only the item, but not number of items that you want to get. So in this one, we can actually add value as well. Right? So let me show you. Right, I will take a new window for this code cell. Right. So in the case, I will follow the same. Right. My shopping list, and it's empty in the beginning. This says empty. So that means if you say len my shopping list, the length will be 0 because we just initialized it. Right, now we are append another list here. So we can say my shopping list dot append. We can say apple and 5 together. Right. So if you do that, now this time when you say print my shopping list, so that will print the main list. Apple now 5 is within the main list. You have another list. Okay, if you want, you can add another. Let me copy paste another one. Let's say oranges. Let's say 3. Right. In this particular case, you have 2 items, 5 apples and 3 oranges. So now if you need to access individual elements, for example, we want to know like what is the number of apples I'm actually planning to purchase. So in that particular case, we can say like this, print shopping list if you put brackets like this. Now this will tell Python to give me the first one. So if you run this, you will get apple 5. So let's say I want to get apple only. So that means you have another index. Let me put then your index start with 0. So you put 0, 0, 0, which ideally should get apple. Similarly, if you want to get the number of apples, you change this. Instead of 0, 0, we will say 0, 1, which will give you the number of apples you are going to change. Right? So this could be used to change the number. Let's say, I change my mind. Let's say I want to get more apples, the 7 apples. So I want to check 5 to 7. So now to do that, I can say, okay, my shopping list. Zero is the first item in the list. And then within that one, right, I will put 1. So this will indicate number of apples. Then I'm going to assign to 7. Basically, I'm changing number of apples here, right? So when we run, we will get it like this. So I can say print my shopping list. Yes, we are getting, okay, now this time within that, we will have 7 apples. Right. If you finish up to this point, can you please indicate in the chat so that I can move to the next one?
Can you explain a bit on this?
From the beginning?
No, from the apple and 5, the number, how it works.
Okay, yeah. So in this one, what I did is I started with the empty list. So that part I hope you understand. Now, the next thing that I did is I instead of just adding apple, I'm adding the number of apples. That means I'm going to adding 2 things. So I will create another list. So when I say my shopping list append, I'm appending 2 values here. So, and we put it as a list. So I will say apple, comma 5. So first value is the item, then the second value is the number of items. So when I say print my shopping list, should tell me, okay, within this list, right? Within this list, okay, we have 2 items again as a list. So that's why we call it a nested list. Now let's say I'm adding another item. So before that, let me say my shopping list dot append. This time I'm going to add, let's say 3 items. So in that particular case, you will see within the main list, we have 2 sub lists, apple 5 and orange 3. So that's appending. I hope that part is clear to you. Is it clear to you now?
Yeah, yes.
Okay. Now, the next thing is we should know how to access different values. Now, let's say I want to access the first item, that means apples. So I can say like this, I can say, okay, print my shopping list 0, which will give us the first item, actually first list, right? Apple, 5 apples. So if you need the second one, you can copy paste the same. Then index will be 1. In Python is actually index based on 0. So are you clear up to this point?
Yeah.
Okay. Now let's say instead of the everything, I need to access the item only. So that means, let's say I want to access the first item only, not the value. So in that particular case, we can say, right, my shopping list, I will say, okay, here I'm actually going to access the first row. Within the list, I'm going to get it another index. So when you put 0, right? So that means within the first 0 will indicate the first item within the list. That means it's another list. Within that, I'm going to access apple. So we will say 0, 0. So if I run it, I will get apple, right? Similarly, if you want to get the number of apples, I can say, okay, first row, and then this is 1. So which will give us, okay, 5. Right. Are you comfortable this?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now I want to change. Now let's say I want to change number of apple to 7. Now simply I can make an assignment saying that, okay, my shopping list, right, 0 will be the first one, that means apple 5. Within that, I will access the number by putting 1. And then I make the assignment saying that, okay, this should be 7. Now, if I put 7 here, it will change the value of number of apples from 5 to 7. So when I say print my shopping list, should tell me, okay, now I have 7 apples. Okay, are we clear up to this point?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks everyone. So I think we can move next one. So this is very interesting. Now, when it comes to data also, data sets, we can use a similar technique. For each row, we can have lists, right? And within the list, you can access individual items. List of lists is very important, right? Now, for example, most of the time, the data is in rows and columns. Similarly, in mathematics, we have matrices where we have values in rows and columns. So the nested list often we can use to represent matrices. Like in mathematically, we write matrices like this. The first row we have 1, 2, 3. Second row we have 4, 5, 6. Third row we have 7, 8, 9. Which means for each row we will create a list. So in the main one, the first row we will have put as a list like this. The second row, another list. The third row, another list, right? So let me share. Right, on this one, so I can say, okay, matrix, right? So this is for the whole matrix. And within that, okay, we have 3 rows. So we have, comma separate, we initialize 3 rows. So within that, we can have the first row. That means 1, 2, 3. Then second row, we have 4, 5, 6. Third row, we have 7, 8, 9. So now if you say, right, print matrix, you don't see this as a matrix like this, it's print as it is. But then when we look at numerical Python and pandas libraries, you will see, they put in a format so that you can see as a matrix, with rows and columns. Now, if you want to, from the previous one, if you want to access the first row, what should I type? Now we have 3 rows, first one, second one, third one. To access the first row, yes, what should I type? Print 1. Yes, anyone in the class? I want to access the first row.
With 0.
Yes. So we can say, okay, matrix, we can put 0 here. So which will give us, okay, first row here. So if I want to access first row, first element, what should I type?
Matrix 0, 0.
Yeah, it should be matrix 0, 0. So there are other ways of accessing this one, easier ways to do that. That part we will discuss later on. So you first select the first row, and within that we have the first element, which we should get 1. Okay, if you are comfortable with up to this point, can you please raise your hands? If you have still doubts, please raise, because it might help the others as well. Right. Okay, you can lower the hands. Thanks. Right. I think we can talk about tuples now. So as I told you earlier, the previous one you can, change. We call mutable. But let's say sometimes we have to, store configurations, things that should not change when you run the program. So if you have a situation like this, then we have to create tuples. In tuples, what happens? We are using brackets instead of square brackets, right? Now, if I get my previous, right, I will start with the list again. So if you say A equals, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, and if you say type, it will tell us the data type, and it will be a list. Now, similarly in tuple, let's say B, I will use brackets 1, 2, 3, 4. And if you say type B, okay, now this will indicate that it's a tuple. Tuple means tuple class, right? Because in Python, everything actually represented classes. Right, now having said that, let me put the values. First of all, we have, right, creating a tuple. We know that simply you can say, okay, number tuple, the name I'm going to give, and we will have rounded brackets. So we can say 11, 2, 23, 45, and 15. And when you print it, you can say simply print number tuple, right? And then if you want to access the first element, it will be easy. You can simply say, okay, print number tuple 0, which will give you the first element, that is 11, right? But you cannot change, right? I told you it's immutable, meaning like if you try to assign, you are getting an error. Let's say 0, I'm going to assign to some other value. This is not possible because in tuple, it will not, right? It says tuple object does not support item assignment. So that means this is wrong. Right. Printing is this more or less same as the previous one. You can iterate using a for loop, which I'm not going to discuss. You can get the length, and to delete it, you can use del, right? Try this. And once you finish, please raise your hands. Right. Give me a couple of minutes. I'll bring some water and come. Right, you can lower the hands.
So here the last one.
Yeah.
So we had to give the number of the element.
No, I
Yeah.
mean, the last one, what I want to explain here is you cannot change. So this is, I'm trying to change the first element to 56, which is not supported, right? So that's what it says. It's immutable, meaning that you cannot change. So whenever you want to like list something not to change during the program, so you can define it within a tuple, right? So that's what I want to emphasize here. But of course, you cannot delete individual elements as well. So if you try to delete, for example, okay, first element, you know, sorry, reference is 0. Again, you cannot, delete. It doesn't support, item deletion. But then again, you can remove because dereferencing this is okay because you are going to remove the whole tuple. So that is possible. So simply to summarize what we have discussed here with tuple data structure, you can store values which you are not going to change within the program execution. Right. Okay, so let's move to the next one. Here are the things that we have discussed. Couple of things I actually didn't discuss. Okay, maybe I will quickly list. The count, again, we have not tried everything available. So if you need to know more, put help tuple will give you the help for tuple data structure. So it's discuss different methods available here. So count is basically written number of occurrences. So if you want to know count, so you can say tuple dot count, which will give you information on how to use count. Return number of occurrence of value. So let me put the previous one. We have num tuple. Okay, now it is not initialized. So let me copy from what we have defined early, right? I will put it again. I'm creating a number tuple. So this time I put number 2 twice, just to elaborate the count. So when you say, okay, number tuple count, so count, let's say 11, hope it will work. Yeah, it says 1. But if you say count 2, it says, there are 2 occurrences. And then similarly, if you want to get the index, that means where it is, right? For example, what is the index value for 23? Now we know that it should be 0, 1, 2. So we are getting index 2, right? So let me put 45 or 15. Okay, I will put 15. So it will say, okay, index is 4. That means this is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Similarly, if you put 2, it will indicate the first occurrence. Because 2 is in 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 2 and 5. So it gives us 0, 1, the first occurrence, right? Okay, so with that, we will finish our discussion on the tuples. Third ones, it's sets. Now, if you compare the difference from the previous previous 2 data structures, that is list and tuples. First one, it's mutable, you can change. Set, Tuple you cannot change, right? Here also, one important thing is there's no order, like indexes are not available. You cannot say, okay, first item, second item, because there's no order there. So we cannot access like index here, right? And you cannot change also, like in previous case, you cannot change also, but you can add new items. So the method it supports are listed here. You can add elements, but then again, it's not like append or insert because there's no position we mean with the sets. You can remove, we can say discard, right? But you cannot change, right? Remember, very important, right? All the others are same, right? Let me demonstrate with the example. You can also work with me together. So in this one, I'm going to discuss set in Python, right? In sets, the first thing that you need to understand the notations that we are using. We are this time using curly brackets. And then you can comma separate like in earlier. So I'm using some numbers, right? And if you say, okay, what is the type of this? You know, Python will tell us it's a set, right? Now in sets, you can add items, right? Printing would be the same. You can use print or you can use a for loop to iterate each item. Length also you can get the same, but then you can add items. So let me show you, right? I'm going to say, okay, number set, add, let me put 6. There's no order and you might get different order, depends on, you know, how this number set. Now, for example, here, the 6 is added to the, it looks like the second one. It's not really. And it's even not sorted as well. Looks sorted, no. There's no, you know, automatically sorted as well. Right? And you cannot individually change as well. Right? So make a note of these things. But I think we might not use tuples as well as tuples we use sometimes provide the arguments, but you know, sets very rarely we will use in our coming sessions. Right. You can remove an item in different way. There are two ways. First one, you can use remove function or remove method. For example, let's say number set dot remove. Let's say I'm trying to remove 5. 5 is not there inside. So you should get an error. So it says there's a key error, nothing to remove. But if you have a number, let's say I want to remove 11, right? And let me print the number list, number set, right? Again, you are getting a set. Again, just to iterate, there's no order, although it looks like an order, there's no order we specify within a set. Now, similarly, if you have discard method, let's say number set discard, again it will remove, but this time it will not generate any error. If you say 5 again here, right, trying to discard, it's there's no error generated here, but 5 is not there. If you already have this, let's say 6, and if you say number set, right, we are getting, it will remove and you can see the outcome. Again, there's no order. You can see that it's random. The way it has written, it will not preserve. So this time you have 2, 15, 23, 45. Looks like, sorted. No, it's not really sorted. And finally, you can delete the number set. Again, you cannot delete individual elements because there's no way we can specify index here. But you can, delete the whole set. So that's possible with sets. Okay, if you're comfortable up to this point, can you please raise your hands? Once you do that, I will move to the next one.
So one question over here. There cannot be two elements with the same value, right, on the set?
Same value means you can add. I don't think it will generate. Let's do that. Good question. Because it's unique. You have unique items. So let's try to add 2, right? I'm going to say, okay, number set, add 2, and then I'm trying to print number set. So there's no error generate here. And it's unique, right? You are adding 2, but it's already there. So unique set of elements is inside the set. By the way, good question you asked that. Anything else? Okay, then we can move
Sir,
to the,
I also have one question. What's the difference between discard and remove?
discard and remove, right? Okay. If you use remove, if the element is not there, it will generate an error. Whereas in discard, it will not generate any error. Now, if you are trying to remove something, it's not existing within the set. Okay, remove gives you an error and discard will not generate any error.
Thank you, sir.
Because sometimes this should be handled in such a way that, like, if you want to generate an error, you can use remove. But if you just want to, generate or try to remove it without generating error, then you use discard. So it depends on what exactly you want to do in the code. Right, the last one, dictionary, is very, very important. You can lower the hands, thanks. Now, so far, except for the set, we were discussing index. That means we specify some order. That means that order we specify with some number, right? We use integer values starting from 0 and so on. But instead of just a number, if you want to specify some key, because sometimes referring 0, 1, 2, sometimes very difficult when you have large number, isn't it? Now, let's say in a data set, for example, if you have a, like, let's say 100 columns, if you try to refer with like 0, 1, and so on, it's very difficult. So the naming is very important. So if you need a place where when you need name items, you can use dictionaries. So in dictionary, we call this as a key. So in dictionary, we are getting what we call key value pairs. Right? So let's start discussing dictionaries. So I'm going to say, okay, we are going to look at the last data structure. Right. So in dictionaries, we are going to specify keys and values, and we can use keys. It's easy for you to access elements instead of just use numbers, right? To explain that, I'm using, okay, as the name says, the dictionary, I'm using a toy problem here. In this toy problem, I'm referring to languages, English and Japanese, representing numbers, right? Right. Now, creating a dictionary is again like in sets, we have curly brackets, but always you have a key value pairs, right? So each value you have a key and a value pair. So to create, you can say, okay, so I'm going to have number dictionary here. So I will start with the, curly brackets, and for each item, we have key. That is, I'm going to refer one to represent ichi. Ichi is to say in Japanese one, right? And similar two is for two in Japanese, we say ni, and for three, right, we will say san, right? Now, and then if you say, once you create, if you look at the type of the dictionary, right, and we should be getting this, okay, sorry. Okay, I missed the comma here, you have to have comma. So like in previous case, after every key value pair, you have to have comma. So that was the mistake I made. Right, it says it's a the dictionary. So number dict is actually we define as a dictionary. Now to printing, it's again very similar. So when you say print number dictionary, so now this time you are getting both the key value pairs. The first key value pair is 1 ichi, second one is 2 ni, and third one is 3 san, right? But if you try to print it like in a previous way, now you have to be very careful. It's slightly different. Now remember, all the previous cases, we can use a for loop to iterate over the values, right? And if you try to do this here as well, for example, if you say for I in number dictionary, and if you say print I, this is the format we have used early. So this will give you only the keys. That means 1, 2, 3. Those are the keys. Right. Now, what do you mean by key here? And now if you want to access an element, we can simply say like this, number dictionary. Now, earlier we used to say 0, 1, 2, and so on. But when it comes to dictionaries, we use these keys. So for example, if you want to get the value for 3, right, it says sun, right? So this is very interesting, and this representation we use when we refer, columns in a data set. Let's say we have a class in a data set. If I want to access it, we use this format. When you have name items, right? So in dictionary also, we can do the same. So we can say number dictionary, and we can say 3, that is the key we are referencing. And when you say 3, it will give us the value sun for this case, right? In list, it would be like something like 0, 1, 2, which is very difficult, right? In some places. Okay, so I told you, like, if you use the iteration with the for loop, we are getting only the keys. But let's say if you need values, then you have to slightly modify the number dictionary here. So you have to use values if you want to print values. So like this, let me put a for loop for I in number dictionary dot values. So if you have values, and if you say print I, right? So This time we are requesting, okay, values to be printed. So it will say Ichini-san in the order. The last one is if you need both values, both keys and also values, then we use, instead of values, we use items. So we can say for I in number dictionary dot items. So we can say, okay, print I. So this time you will see this will print both key and value pairs as tuples. Remember we discussed earlier tuples. It gives us as tuples. So 1 Ichi, sorry, 2 me and 3 San and so. Sorry. Okay, maybe I will show you. If you finish up to this point, please raise your hands. How about Tilina, Danushka, Hassan, Swani, Sweeney, I guess, I don't know whether I pronounced correctly, sorry. Adit, are you Adit or Ajit?
It is Adit, sir.
By the way, am I going too fast? Are you okay with the face? Is it okay?
Yes, sir. For me, it's okay.
Yeah, please let me know in case if you feel that I'm going too fast, please do let me know. Right, thanks. Right, few more just to discuss. Getting length will be the same, so we can use length function, length number dictionary, right, to get number of items here. So in our case, we have 3 items, right? Then accessing values. So I already showed you earlier. So you can use within square brackets, you can indicate the key, then you can get the value. Or else the second method is you can use get method. You can say number dict dot get. Within bracket, you can list the key value. Right. Now let me explain adding a new item. Now adding a new item means you have to provide both key and value pairs. So in our case, we can say number dictionary. In this case, I'm going to add the 4th element and it's your, right? 4th element, it's your. So now if you print, number dictionary, yep. So you have the 4th value, right? Again, there's no order as such. When you say 4th one could be anywhere, and then whenever you need it, you can get. So for example, let me put a code on saying that, okay, for I in number dict dot items. So you can say print I. So it looks like this. And then whenever you can access it, Um, okay, let me explain the change. Right. Okay, in Japanese, there are two versions for number fu. So let's say I want to refer the second way. Instead of yon, if I want to say she, right, I can change the value. So to change the value, you can specify the key. With number dictionary, you will say, okay, 4, and that should be she. And I'm going to have number dict again. So if I put it this way and if I run it, right, we are getting like this. Finally, to remove the item, simply you can use the del, and you can refer with the key. So if you want to remove 2, so we can say number dict 2 will remove the key with the value 2. Okay, so if you are comfortable up to this point, please raise your hands so that we can move to the next one. Okay, yes, you can lower the hands. Let's move on to the next topic. I would like to discuss a little bit on string values. Now, interestingly, strings we can see as a list of characters. So in this example, what you see is we have a string. We say S is dialogue, and you can think this as a list of characters, which means you can specify index. Now, when we specify index, I told you the other day, you can have forward indexing, like starting from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. Or you can go for backward indexing. We have -1, -2, -3, -4, -5, and -6, and so on. Right. Now, why did you check the given values? In the given values, you should see the same answers, right? So let me start with text. I'm going to talk about strings here in Python. And the interesting point with the strings is you can treat it as a list of characters. So when I say S equals dialogue or any other string, we can individually access element. Now, for example, if I say S note, yes, we'll get D. first character. Likewise, if you put 1, then you get second character. Right? So the last one, we have to say 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So to access the last one, I can put S5. Now, the problem is sometimes you have to count the number of characters. If you have a lengthy value, the easiest way to get the last, character is you use the backward indexing. That means just put -1. This is easy, isn't it? This representation is very important when you work with the data sets. When you want to access the last column, okay, we use the backward index in most of the cases, right? So remember this, very important. So forward indexing is easy if you want to access it from the beginning. If you want to access it from at the end, from the end side, from the end, then use backward indexing. But you can see what I put in the table, they are the same, right? So S naught is same as S -6, S3 is same as S -3, S5 is same as -1. But remember one more thing, it's immutable, which meaning like you cannot change the what is inside these characters. Okay, now, but before that, have you all finished up to this point? Or do you need more time? Tushar, finished?
Yes, sir.
Okay, now I would like to discuss one more interesting thing, because again, this is also very important for us when it comes to, work with the data as well. That is the slicing, right? Now here we are going to discuss string slicing, but that can be used in, even in the lists, even in NumPy arrays, even in, pandas, data frames, and so on, right? Now, the same string, I want you to try the following table. Once you are comfortable with that one, please raise your hands. Please lower the hands now. And then I'm going to explain. Now see whether you can understand this. So if you need any clarification, please let me know. By the way, row wise, you should get the same answer. But you don't understand my representation, please let me know, I will explain. So remember the same, reference we are using in range function. We are going to use a range next, and everywhere when you have start, stop, step, it refers the same thing. Now starting point, you refer at 0. That means from the beginning, goes up to fourth value. Up to fourth means not including 4. That means 0, 1, 2, 3, right? So you should get dial for the first one. So when you start with first 0, you don't have to indicate. So you see this reference sometimes, right? So when you don't have a value in beginning, so you can assume that, okay, this is the starting point, that is 0. That means you can say, okay, so this representation important, you can make a note here. So that is to say, okay, I need first 4 characters. Very interesting, because for example, in data set, for example, when we need first 10 columns, I can just put 10 here, right? It'll give you the first 10. So this one, it'll gives me the first 4 characters. One more thing, yeah, if you want to go from the beginning to the end, right? That means in representation, you might think in this way, the first iteration, you can say 4 in range, and you can say length s. Basically, it goes from beginning to the end. You can iterate through every character at a time. But simple method to go through everything is use of for loop, like in previous case, I in whatever the list. So in this particular case, we put the string, and then simply we can print I, the similar notation that we have discussed with the list, which will go through each individual characters. Right, any questions from this one?
So in the ascending order, it's 6 now. But when you are going in the descending order, why is it -7?
All right. No, I mean, I think we have seen it there, right? Now, if you look at here, 6 means after this number, right? Because when you want to go up to this one, we will have index up to, last one index is 5. So that's why we put 6. It goes up to 6, not including 6. This is the, representation that we have used. Similarly, when you go backward, we go from -1 to -6. So since we want to go up to that point, we have to have -7, right?
Correct, sir.
Yeah, thanks. Right. Yeah. So I might not be able to start numerical Python today, but I think before that, we need to understand the object orientation in Python. So let me cover that part for today. So which means we actually covered all the basics that we need to work with data science related modules, which we are going to start from the next session. So let's look at very briefly in object orientation in Python. So OOP actually supported in many programming languages, and same goes with Python as well. Interestingly, Python can be used in different paradigms, like, for example, again, quite popular in functional programming and likewise object-oriented programming as well. Because why I want to discuss this is, for example, the older data types that we have discussed are classes. So the idea of classes is understanding them, and also the creation of the methods. When you look at the help, you will see that they are all written as classes in Python. Right now, if you're new to object orientation, it's another paradigm where we see everything as objects. Like if you want to represent a student in your program, we can represent this as a student object. Now, when you say object, that can actually represent each individual instances. Now, for example, each of you in the class can be represented as student objects, right? In a game, for example, we can identify the game characters are individual objects. Now, create these objects, we have to create what we call a class. The class kind of a template that we will use. So in a class, usually we can find variables as well as methods. We use the terms instant variables to say that the attributes in a class, or sometimes we call data members. The methods or the functions are the next part of it. So when you want to define a class, usually we use class diagrams. In software development, usually we use 3 sections like this to represent classes. So you will have a name and then set of variables we call instant variables. Now, for example, in this example, you will see a credit card class which represent a credit card. So in a credit card, usually we have customer name, bank name, and there will be an account associated with this, as well as there will be a credit card limit, and there will be a balance and so on. These are like variable. And then whatever you can perform, there are some methods. So there are some getters and setters, which means you can get whatever the variables, like get customer means you can get the customer name, and you can have setters like set customer name, you can change it and so on. So these are the method. And in this particular case, we have a couple of methods to get the customer details, bank details, balance, and so on. Similarly, there are other methods to do some purchasing, like you purchase something, and then you can settle the credit card. Now for that, I have a method called make payment. So similarly, you can model all the interaction with other objects as a class. Right. Now the interesting point is how you define something like this, right? So when you want to represent, in object orientation, we can define classes for everything. Now, some examples, we can represent a person as an object person, and within that, we can have to represent a person with the name and age and address and so on. And then we can define method for walking, talking, and so on. Similarly, if you want to have an email application, if you want to represent an email, then usually we will have recipient list, subject, and body. And then you can send an email, you can add an attachment. These are called methods. And similarly, another example, if you take car, for example, you can represent the car using year, model, mileage. And then you can have a set of methods like accelerate and brake. Right. So the class, as I told you, we can think as a kind of a template, and then using that template, you can create a set of objects with different, changes, different values, or different instances. So for the creation happen with what we call the constructor. So usually we will create a template, and then we will create objects using the constructor. Right. If we look at the code for this, right, before we code, we will have something called self-identifier, because in object, you can refer the same object, or you can refer some other objects. You can perform some operation on other objects. But whenever we talk about the same object, we use self-identifier. Okay, now let me show you a example, and we'll finish for today. So in this very small problem, I'm going to look at student class with name attribute, and I will have two methods to get a name of the student, and also let's say another method called study. So any class in Python looks similar to this one. So you will have a class and a class name. In my case, we have a class student. And then we have an initialization, the constructor we call it. In constructor, we will have as underscore underscore. You have two underscores here, init underscore underscore. And then self, meaning you are referring the same object, and then you provide the student name. So what happens whenever you want to create a student object, you can use the constructor by providing a student name, so that the provided student name will save under the instant variable name. So that's what we use self keyword here. So self.name means in the same object, the name variable, we store the provided value student name. Similarly, we can have set of methods defined under this. So we will have getting a name, get name, and we are referencing. So all the methods and the constructors, you will see a self, which indicates that you perform this on the same object. So when you're getting a name, meaning that you are returning the name of the same object. So that's what happened here. And similarly, the study method simply returning some string. Right. I think the time is up for today, so I'm not going to talk about this. So you can go through, and there will be an example, complete example on credit card that I have talked about earlier. So you can try this and come back in the next class. In case if you do not understand, I will explain from beginning to the end, and we'll understand how classes are worked in Python, which will helpful for us to, when you are referring different modules and we are calling methods, because everything is written as classes in Python. Okay, having said that, I would like to stop for today. And do you have any questions on whatever the things we have covered for today's session? Okay, then good night, everyone. We'll meet next week. Hopefully, yeah, I try my best to not to change the time. So today I had some traveling issues, so that's why it got delayed in the morning.